Super Seaweeds, Alaskan Treasure. This lesson is intended for young students. This lesson has 3 learning goals. We can choose 1, 2, or all 3. The first is, I know different types of seaweed. The second is, I know what micro and macro algae are. And the third is, I can name 1 species of seaweed that is found in Alaska. To get started, we'll watch a short video from the Ocean Today video series created by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA. Let's dive down into a kelp forest.
Kelp forests can be seen along much of the west coast of North America. Kelp are actually large brown algae that live in cool, relatively shallow waters close to the shore. They grow in dense groupings, much like a forest on land. These underwater towers of kelp provide food and shelter for thousands of fish, invertebrate, and marine mammal species. Kelp are very simple organisms that consist of a holdfast, a stipe, and blades. At the bottom is a root-like structure called a holdfast that anchors kelp to rocks and other materials on the ocean floor. Young kelp must compete for space to settle and grow, as the rocky bottom is carpeted with smaller algae and invertebrates like anemones and sponges. The stipe is similar to a plant's stem. It is strong, yet flexible, allowing kelp to sway in the currents of the ocean. Many fish use this middle area of the kelp forest as hunting grounds. The blades contain a special gas which act like a float, keeping the kelp blades close to the surface of the water where they absorb energy from the sun. This ability to float raises the kelp to the sea surface, forming a dense canopy. The canopy serves as a nursery or brood area for many organisms due to the warmer surface temperatures and slower water currents. Many organisms, from small fish to birds and even whales, use the thick blades as a safe shelter for their young from predators or even rough storms. Kelp forests have a greater variety and higher diversity of plants and animals than almost any other ocean community. NOAA scientists study kelp forests by visiting the same locations over and over to assess the presence and abundance of a variety of organisms. Monitoring allows marine scientists to determine if the kelp forest is changing over time and to identify the cause of those changes, whether natural or human. Healthy kelp forests maintain the existence of thousands of plants and animals, fish stocks, and many ocean and tourism-based businesses. All of these require a thriving ocean ecosystem. We all depend on the ocean for food, oxygen, and even life-saving pharmaceuticals. Do your part to keep our ocean and local waterways clean, litter-free, and healthy.
There are 3 main types of seaweeds. In that video, we saw a lot of browns, but there's 2 other kinds. Red, or rhodophyta, green, or chlorophyta, and brown, or phaeophyta. These are 3 examples of seaweeds found in Alaska. The picture of the red is Palmaria hecatensis, or Pacific dulse, commonly known as black seaweed in southeast Alaska. The green is called Codium fragile, or dead man's fingers, and the brown is called Nereocystis leuciana, or bullwhip kelp. You may be familiar with the word algae, which refers to organisms that are photosynthetic, grow in water, and share other traits. Seaweeds are a type of algae that can be seen without a microscope and live in the marine environment. Algae share some characteristics with plants, such as making food from photosynthesis, which we'll talk about in the next lesson, but they're different in many ways. One way is that they don't get nutrients from the earth with roots like plants do. Red, green, and brown seaweeds have different pigments in them, which make them different colors. They live in different habitats, and they have different chemical composition, making them useful for different things. Red seaweeds can grow in very deep water because they are the best at absorbing light. Green seaweed can grow in fresh and salt water. And brown seaweed can be huge and grow very fast, up to 2 feet per day. Have you seen any of these seaweeds at the beach before or in the ocean? Here's a green seaweed that I found at the beach. This one is called sea lettuce. I also found this brown seaweed called fucus that grows on the rocks here. So now we know that there are 3 main types of seaweed: red, green, and brown. In the beginning of the lesson, we said that seaweed can be seen without a microscope. When something can be seen without a microscope, it's called macro, so we call this macroalgae. The seaweed that you see washed up on the beach or growing in the ocean is all macroalgae. Brown macroalgae is called kelp and often grows in forests, creating habitat for other animals like fish, sea otters, and sea stars. Many are farmed or collected and eaten by people or used in medicine, food, makeup, and many other things. But throughout the ocean and freshwater, there is another type of algae that can only be seen with a microscope. This is called microalgae. These are tiny unicellular organisms, meaning they only have one cell. To put that in perspective, a 10-year-old human has about 17 trillion cells. These organisms are called phytoplankton. There are many different types. They form the base of the food web in the ocean. They're eaten by tiny animals, which are eaten by bigger animals like fish, who are eaten by bigger animals like sharks and humans. Without phytoplankton, there would be no life in the sea. They are a very important algae. Here's some photos of macro and microalgae. What do you notice about the shapes of them? How do you think that the shape they're in help them survive in their environment? In the pictures of macroalgae, I see that there's a lot of different species, different colors, that are growing on the same rock. I also see that there's a sea star living amongst them. In the other photo, the macroalgae is growing underwater, and it looks like it's all one kind. It's also growing up towards the sun and is attached to the bottom. In the microalgae picture, or phytoplankton, there's a bunch of different species of phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are not attached to the bottom, and they float freely in the water. You'll also notice that many of these species are transparent, and you can see through them. They're all different shapes, and these shapes are different adaptations that they have to float in the water column and photosynthesize. Alaska has an incredible diversity of both macro and microalgae. The seaweeds you see here are just a few examples. Can you spot the 2 species that I found at the beach? Bonus points if you can find the crab. Seaweeds play an essential role in the Alaskan ecosystem as food, habitat, and more. Here are 2 great guidebooks for identifying the seaweeds of Alaska: Common Edible Seaweeds in the Gulf of Alaska and Field Guide to Seaweeds of Alaska. Next time you visit a beach, see what you can find. To end our lesson, here's a fun video called The Seaweed on Algae by Formidable Vegetable.
Would the ocean be embarrassed every time the seaweed? Ooh. I don't think she feels that callous toward the likes of me. Well, let me introduce myself. algae. Pump out more air than the trees, filter all the scum. Some say I'm the reason there's life on Earth. Well, you're welcome. Now the whales keep on beaching.
That's no place for a large water mammal.
And the coral keeps on bleaching.
The fish don't like it when the color's too mellow.
But I'll just keep on preaching the goodness of algae.
I'm talking about the original green.
Algae.
Keeping the water and the airways clean.
Algae. That's me.
He's the original green.
Algae.
The OG is the algae. The algae is the OG.